My name is Marion Wells, and at 56 years old, I had become an expert at managing small catastrophes alone. The leaking faucet, the burned-out light bulb in the fixture that required a ladder and courage, the strange noise the furnace made every October that turned out to be nothing but always sounded like impending doom. These were the territories of my independence, hard-won after my divorce from Thomas 7 years ago, and I navigated them with a competence I'd had to teach myself one YouTube tutorial at a time. But this was different. It was a Saturday morning in early November when I discovered the problem. I'd gone into the kitchen to make coffee, still in my robe, hair unbrushed, moving through the morning with the slow comfort of someone who lived alone and liked it that way. When I turned on the sink to fill the kettle, water began streaming not just from the faucet, but from somewhere beneath the cabinet, pooling rapidly on the tile floor. I shut off the water, grabbed every towel I owned, and crouched down to investigate. The pipe connection under the sink had apparently decided that 23 years of service was enough, and it was retiring with dramatic flair. Water was everywhere, soaking into the cabinet wood, dripping onto my cleaning supplies, creating a small lake that my towels were woefully inadequate to manage. I sat back on my heels, surveying the damage, and felt that particular cocktail of frustration and resignation that comes with homeownership when you're the only owner around to handle things. I could call a plumber, should call a plumber really, but it was Saturday, which meant emergency rates, and my freelance graphic design income, while steady, didn't exactly accommodate financial carelessness. I thought about calling my son, David, who was handy in an abstract way, but lived 2 hours away in Providence with his partner. Or my daughter Claire, who would offer to help but was 7 months pregnant and already had enough to worry about. Or I could try to fix it myself. Watch another YouTube video. Make another trip to Home Depot, where the teenage employees would try to be helpful while clearly wondering why I didn't just hire someone. I was weighing these options, still surrounded by soggy towels, when my phone rang. Thomas. My ex-husband calling on a Saturday morning was unusual enough that I considered not answering. We were cordial, had managed over 7 years to build something approximating friendship from the ruins of our 26-year marriage, but we didn't chat, didn't call without reason. "Marion," he said when I answered, and I could hear the slight uncertainty in his voice that meant he needed something. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "That depends on your definition of bad," I said, looking at the puddles spreading across my kitchen floor. "I'm currently having a plumbing crisis." "Ah, well, this might be fortuitous timing then." He paused. "I'm actually calling to ask for a favor. My son, Jamie, just moved to Boston for a new job, and he's having some trouble finding a place. The rental market is insane right now. I was wondering if he might be able to stay in your guest room for a few weeks while he searches. And if you need plumbing help, Jamie's actually quite handy. He renovated his entire apartment in Chicago." I processed this slowly. Jamie, Thomas's son from his second marriage to Nicole, which had lasted exactly 4 years before imploding even more spectacularly than ours had. Jamie, who I'd met perhaps 3 times total at obligatory family gatherings. Jamie, who would have been, in his early 20s when I'd last seen him at Claire's college graduation? "How old is Jamie now?" I asked. 29. He's a software engineer, very responsible. And Marion, I wouldn't ask if I had other options, but Nicole's not speaking to me, and my apartment is too small. And I thought, well, you have that extra room since Claire moved out. 29. Young enough to be my son. Thomas's son, technically, though not mine, a distinction that mattered more than it perhaps should have. "Thomas, I don't know if that's a good idea. I'll pay you rent, whatever you think is fair, and it would only be a few weeks, just until he finds a place. Please, Marion, he's a good kid." A good kid. 29 years old and still a kid to his father. I looked at my flooded kitchen, thought about my bank account, and made a decision that I would spend the next several months both regretting and being grateful for in equal measure. "Fine," I said, "but only for a few weeks, and he fixes my sink first." Jamie Wells arrived that afternoon with 2 large suitcases, a laptop bag, and the kind of apologetic demeanor that suggested his father had briefed him thoroughly on the imposition he was making. I opened the door to find a young man who looked almost nothing like Thomas. Where my ex-husband was stocky and going bald, Jamie was lean, with thick dark hair that fell slightly too long over his forehead. He had his mother Nicole's fine features and green eyes, but there was something in his expression, a thoughtfulness, a careful attention that was distinctly his own. "Mrs. Wells," he said, extending his hand, "thank you so much for doing this. I promise I'll stay out of your way and find a place as quickly as possible." "It's Marion," I said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and before you get settled, you apparently owe me some plumbing expertise. His face brightened with what looked like genuine relief at having something useful to do. "The kitchen sink, Dad mentioned? It's currently losing its will to live all over my floor." He smiled, a quick, transforming expression that made him look even younger. "Lead the way." I showed him the disaster in the kitchen, now somewhat controlled by my battalion of towels, but still problematic. Jamie crouched down immediately, examining the situation with the confident efficiency of someone who actually knew what they were doing. "This connection is completely corroded," he said, pointing to the offending pipe. "You'll need a new P-trap assembly. Do you have a hardware store nearby? There's a Home Depot about 10 minutes away." "Perfect. Give me 20 minutes to drop my stuff in the guest room, and I'll run out and grab what we need. Should be an easy fix." We. As if this was a collaborative project rather than him solving my problem out of obligation. But there was something disarming about his eagerness to help, his lack of condescension. He wasn't treating me like a helpless middle-aged woman who couldn't manage her own home. He was treating me like someone with a problem he could solve. I showed him to Claire's old room, now my guest room, though guests were rare. I'd redecorated after she moved out, painting the walls a soft gray blue and replacing her old furniture with a comfortable queen bed and a reading chair I'd found at an estate sale. It was actually one of my favorite rooms in the house now, quiet and serene, facing the small garden I'd been cultivating. "This is really nice," Jamie said, setting his suitcases down. "Thank you again, Marion. I won't be in your way, I promise." "You're fixing my sink? You get some grace for that alone." He grinned. Fair trade. After he left for Home Depot, I changed out of my bathrobe into actual clothes, jeans and a comfortable sweater, and attempted to make my kitchen presentable. I'd gotten used to living alone, to the particular rhythms and habits of solitary domesticity. Having someone else in my space, even temporarily, felt like an intrusion I wasn't sure I was ready for. But the sink needed fixing, and the extra money wouldn't hurt, and it was only for a few weeks. Jamie returned with supplies and got to work immediately. I offered to help, but he waved me off. "I've got this. You just need to shut off the water main. Do you know where that is?" I did, thankfully. One of the first things I'd learned after Thomas moved out was where all the crucial house controls were located. While Jamie worked, I made tea and tried not to hover. But I found myself watching him from the doorway, noting the careful precision with which he approached the task. He didn't rush, didn't force anything. When something didn't fit quite right, he stopped and reassessed rather than muscling through. "You really do know what you're doing," I said after he'd been working for about 20 minutes. He glanced up, his hair falling into his eyes, and smiled. "My mom's second husband was a contractor. I spent a lot of summers helping him with renovations. Learned more about plumbing than I ever expected to need." He paused. "Though my day job is about as far from manual labor as you can get, staring at code all day isn't exactly physical." "What kind of software engineering?" "Machine learning, mostly. I work for a startup that's trying to make AI more interpretable, so people can actually understand why the system made the decision it made." He tightened something under the sink. "It's interesting work, but honestly, it's nice to fix something concrete for once. Pipes are much more straightforward than algorithms." There was something charming about his enthusiasm, the way he talked about both his technical work and his plumbing task with equal engagement. He wasn't performing competence. He was simply competent and comfortable being so. "Try turning the water back on," he said eventually. I did. Water flowed from the faucet normally and, crucially, stayed contained within the appropriate pipes. "You're a miracle worker," I said. He crawled out from under the sink, wiping his hands on a rag he'd brought. "Hardly, but I'm glad I could help." He looked at me directly, those green eyes serious. "Marion, I really do appreciate you letting me stay here. I know it's probably weird, your ex-husband's kid crashing in your guest room. If it gets uncomfortable, just say the word, and I'll figure something else out." "It's not that weird," I lied. "And you just fixed my sink. You've earned at least a few days." That first evening was surprisingly easy. I made dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta with vegetables, and Jamie insisted on cleaning up afterward. We ate in my small dining room, the kind of comfortable, quiet meal that I'd gotten used to having alone, but that felt different, more companionable, with someone across the table. He told me about his job search, about the specific neighborhood he was hoping to find an apartment in. I told him about my work, designing book covers for small presses and occasionally creating brand materials for local businesses. "That sounds amazing," he said. "Creating something visual every day. Do you love it?" The question surprised me. Most people asked if it paid well or if it was stable. No one asked if I loved it. "I do," I said honestly. "It took me a while to get here. I spent 20 years doing marketing for a pharmaceutical company, which was soul-crushing but paid well. After the divorce, I decided if I was going to rebuild my life, I might as well rebuild it around something I actually cared about." "That's brave." "That's desperate," I corrected, but I smiled. "Sometimes they look the same from the outside." After dinner, Jamie disappeared into the guest room with his laptop, and I retreated to my own space, the small study where I worked, surrounded by color swatches and half-finished designs. I tried to focus on the book cover I was designing, but I kept getting distracted by the awareness of another person in my house. It wasn't unpleasant, exactly, just strange. I'd gotten so used to the particular silence of living alone, the sounds I made, the rhythms I kept. Now there were other sounds. Jamie moving around in the guest room, water running in the bathroom, the soft murmur of a phone call he took around 8 o'clock. That night, lying in my own bed, I realized it had been 7 years since anyone other than my children had stayed overnight in this house. 7 years of solitude that I'd mostly been grateful for. But maybe, a small voice suggested, I'd also been lonely. I pushed the thought away and went to sleep. The first week passed easily enough. Jamie was as good as his word. He stayed out of my way, kept his belongings contained to the guest room, cleaned up after himself scrupulously. He left early for his new job and often came home late, usually with takeout that he'd offer to share. We fell into an accidental routine. I'd make coffee in the morning, and he'd appear just as it finished brewing, accepting a cup with genuine gratitude before disappearing to get ready for work. In the evenings, if we were both home, we'd have dinner together. Sometimes something I'd cooked, sometimes something he'd brought home, always with easy conversation that never felt forced. He asked about my work, seemed genuinely interested in the creative process. I asked about his job, understood about 20% of what he explained, and enjoyed his patient attempt to make machine learning comprehensible to someone whose technical expertise topped out at Photoshop. It was nice, comfortable in a way I hadn't expected. But I was also, increasingly, uncomfortably aware that Jamie was an attractive young man. Not in the way I'd notice a stranger on the street or an actor on television, but in the particular, dangerous way that comes from proximity and attention. The way he pushed his hair back when he was concentrating, the rare, brilliant smile when something genuinely amused him, the careful courtesy with which he moved through my space, always conscious of not intruding. He was 29, I was 56. The math alone should have made any awareness inappropriate. The fact that he was technically my ex-husband's son made it even more so. And yet, there was a moment, about 10 days into his stay, when I walked into the kitchen early on a Saturday morning and found him making breakfast. He'd gone for a run, something he did most mornings, and was still in his running clothes, t-shirt damp with sweat, hair disheveled, moving around my kitchen with unconscious ease as he scrambled eggs. "Morning," he said, glancing up. "Want some? I made extra." "Sure," I said, trying not to notice the way his t-shirt clung to his shoulders, the lean muscle of his arms. What was wrong with me? He was a child. Not literally. 29 was definitely an adult, but young enough to be my son. Young enough that this awareness felt predatory, inappropriate, shameful. I took the plate of eggs he offered and fled to the dining room, putting physical distance between us as if that could eliminate the distance I needed in my own head. Over breakfast, he mentioned he had 3 apartment viewings that day. "Fingers crossed one of them works out," he said. "You've been incredibly generous letting me stay this long, but I know I'm probably cramping your style." "You're not," I said automatically. Then, more honestly, "It's actually been nice having someone around. The house feels less empty." He looked at me with something I couldn't quite read in his expression. "You live alone?" "For 7 years now. My kids are grown. David's in Providence, Claire's in Cambridge. They visit, but not often enough to keep the house from feeling big. That must be lonely sometimes." The directness of the statement caught me off guard. Most people danced around the subject of my solitude, treating it like a condition to be pitied or a choice to be celebrated, but rarely acknowledging it as simply what it was. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I chose it. After Thomas and I divorced, I needed space to figure out who I was without him. And that required being alone. Did you figure it out?" "Mostly," I smiled. "I'm still working on some of the details." His apartment viewings all fell through. One place was half the size it had appeared in photos, another came with a roommate situation that sounded nightmarish, and the third was beautiful but far outside his budget. He came home that evening frustrated and tired. "The rental market is absolutely brutal," he said, dropping onto my couch with the kind of exhausted defeat I recognized from my own housing searches. "I don't understand how anyone finds a place in this city." "It took me 3 months to find this house after the divorce," I said, sitting in the armchair across from him. "And I had the advantage of a decent budget and desperation." "How desperate are we talking?" "I looked at a place where the landlord's solution to the mice problem was just get a cat. I'm allergic to cats." He laughed, the sound filling my living room in a way that made the space feel warmer. "Okay, that makes me feel better about today." We ordered Thai food and watched a movie. His choice, some sci-fi thing that was more thoughtful than I expected. Sitting there in my living room, sharing pad thai and debating the implications of AI consciousness, I felt something shift. This didn't feel like hosting my ex-husband's son anymore. It felt like spending time with someone I genuinely enjoyed. And that realization terrified me. The shift happened so gradually that I couldn't pinpoint exactly when things changed. When the comfortable routine of cohabitation became something more charged. When the awareness I'd been trying to ignore became impossible to deny. Maybe it was the night he cooked dinner, a complex Indian dish his mother had taught him, and we drank wine and talked until midnight about everything and nothing. About my marriage to Thomas and why it had ended, about his complicated relationship with his mother. About the ways we'd both been trying to figure out who we were separate from our family's expectations. "You're different than I expected," he said at one point, refilling my wine glass. "Different how?" "I don't know. When Dad described you, he made you sound safe, predictable, like you were just his ex-wife, this fixed category in his life." He looked at me intently. "But you're not that. You're interesting. You're still becoming." The way he said it, "still becoming," made something in my chest tighten. I'm 56, I said quietly. Most people think all the becoming is behind me. Most people are idiots. Or maybe it was the afternoon I came home from a frustrating client meeting to find Jamie in my living room, surrounded by apartment listings, looking defeated. Nothing? I asked. Nothing remotely reasonable. He rubbed his face tiredly. I'm starting to think I should just stay in a hotel until something opens up. I've imposed on you long enough. Don't be ridiculous. Hotels are expensive, and you're not an imposition. Marion, I've been here almost 3 weeks. And I sat down next to him on the couch, closer than I'd intended. You pay rent, you're helpful around the house, and you're better company than I've had in years. If you leave, I'll just go back to eating alone and talking to myself. He turned to look at me, and we were suddenly very close. Close enough that I could see the exact shade of green in his eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his breath caught slightly. You talk to yourself? He said, voice lighter than his expression. Constantly. It's one of the perks of living alone. No one judges your conversations. What do you talk about? Usually arguing with myself about design choices, sometimes giving pep talks, occasionally organizing my grocery list out loud. I smiled. Very glamorous stuff. I talk to myself too, he admitted. Usually while I'm coding. My coworkers used to make fun of me for it. See, we're both weird. You might as well stay. Something passed between us in that moment. A recognition, an acknowledgement of something neither of us wanted to name. He didn't move to a hotel. But something had shifted. The air between us felt different, charged with a possibility that shouldn't exist but did anyway. I started noticing more. The way he looked at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way our hands would accidentally brush when passing dishes at dinner. The way conversations would stretch late into the evening, neither of us wanting to be the first to say goodnight. And I hated myself for noticing. Hated the flutter in my stomach when he smiled at me. Hated how aware I was of him moving through my house. Hated that I'd started putting on real clothes instead of my comfortable loungewear, wearing the perfume I rarely bothered with, caring about things I hadn't cared about in years. This was ridiculous, inappropriate, a cliché so obvious it was embarrassing. I was a 56-year-old woman developing feelings for a 29-year-old man who was living in my house out of necessity, not desire, who was my ex-husband's son, making this not just inappropriate but vaguely incestuous in a way that made my skin crawl when I thought about it too directly. I needed to shut this down, create distance, remind myself that whatever I thought I was feeling was just loneliness dressed up as attraction. But then there was the night it rained. It was one of those November storms that comes in hard and unexpected, all thunder and driving rain. I'd gone to bed early with a book, leaving Jamie working in the living room on some urgent project for work. Around midnight, the power went out. I heard him moving around downstairs, and then his voice calling up. "Marion, you okay?" "Fine," I called back. "There are flashlights in the kitchen drawer next to the stove." I heard him rummaging, then footsteps on the stairs. A knock on my bedroom door. "I found the flashlights," he said through the door, "but I wanted to make sure you had one too." I opened the door. He stood there in sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair disheveled, holding a flashlight like an offering. "Thanks," I said, taking it from him. Neither of us moved. The storm raged outside, rain beating against the windows. In the darkness, with only the flashlight beam between us, everything felt different, stripped down, honest, in a way that daylight wouldn't have allowed. "Marion," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." Am I imagining this? My heart stopped. Imagining what? This. Whatever's been happening between us. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. Because if I'm completely misreading the situation, I need you to tell me so I can stop feeling insane. I should have lied. Should have laughed it off, told him he was imagining things, created the distance we desperately needed. Instead, I heard myself say, "You're not imagining it." He took a step closer. "I know this is complicated. I know all the reasons this shouldn't, couldn't. I know the age difference and the connection to my dad and the fact that I'm living in your house. Believe me, I've listed them all out, multiple times. And none of it makes me stop thinking about you." His voice was rough, honest. "I wake up every morning looking forward to coffee with you. I come home from work hoping you'll be there. I find excuses to stay up late just so we can talk more. And I know that's inappropriate, and I know I should probably move out. But Marion, don't," I whispered. "Don't what?" "Don't move out." The words came out before I could stop them. "Don't. I don't want you to go." We stood there in the darkness, the storm providing cover for this confession we were both making. "What do we do?" he asked. "I don't know." I was trembling slightly, from fear or desire or the sheer impossibility of this moment. "This is insane, Jamie. You're 29. I'm 56. You're my ex-husband's son. I know. People would think, God, I don't even know what they'd think, that I'm some kind of predator, that they're having some kind of complex psychological issue, that this is wrong in about 17 different ways. I know that too." He took another step closer, close enough now that I could feel the heat of him. "Does it feel wrong to you?" That was the problem. It didn't feel wrong. It felt terrifying and impossible and completely unexpected. But it didn't feel wrong. "No," I admitted. "Then maybe that's what matters." He reached out slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, and touched my face. Just his fingertips, tracing the line of my jaw with a gentleness that made my breath catch. "You're beautiful," he said quietly. "I don't think you know that. Or maybe you knew it once and forgot. But Marion, you're extraordinary. I'm old enough to be your mother. You're not my mother. You're not even close to my mother." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. "You're this brilliant, creative, funny woman who's been so kind to me, who makes me want to be home instead of anywhere else, who looks at me like I'm worth seeing. Jamie, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I'm not expecting anything. I just needed you to know that this isn't in your head, that I feel it too, whatever this is." The power chose that moment to come back on, flooding my bedroom with light and breaking whatever spell the darkness had cast. Jamie stepped back immediately, dropping his hand. In the sudden brightness, I could see the flush on his cheeks, the uncertainty in his eyes. I should go to bed," he said. "I'm sorry if I overstepped." "You didn't." He looked at me for a long moment, something like hope flickering across his face. Then he nodded and left, closing my bedroom door quietly behind him. I stood there for a long time, heart racing, mind spinning, trying to process what had just happened. Jamie Wells, my ex-husband's 29-year-old son, had just told me he had feelings for me, and I, God help me, had admitted I felt the same way. I didn't sleep that night. Just lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how I'd arrived at this impossible moment. The next morning arrived with the particular awkwardness of confessions made in darkness that must now be faced in daylight. I came downstairs to find Jamie already in the kitchen, making coffee with studied casualness that fooled neither of us. "Morning," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Morning." We moved around each other carefully, maintaining physical distance, the easy comfort of the previous weeks replaced by a charged awareness that made every accidental touch feel significant. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "We need to talk about last night," I said. He set down his coffee cup. "Yeah, we do." We sat at the kitchen table, across from each other, and I forced myself to be the adult in this situation, even though every part of me wanted to run away from the conversation. Jamie, I need you to understand something. What you're feeling, what we're both feeling, it can't happen. Why not? Because I'm 56 years old. You keep saying that like it matters to me. It doesn't. It should matter. The age difference alone makes this inappropriate, but add in the fact that you're Thomas's son, that you're living in my house, that I'm in a position of power here. Power? He laughed, not unkindly. Marion, you're not my landlord or my boss. You're a woman who did me a favor, who I happen to have feelings for. And unless I'm completely wrong, you have feelings for me too. Where's the power imbalance in that? In the life experience, in the difference in where we are in our lives. You're just starting out. New job, new city, your whole future ahead of you. I've already done all that. I've been married, raised kids, built a career. We're in completely different places. So, he leaned forward, intent. Marion, I'm not looking for someone to build a life with from scratch. I've done the 20-something dating thing. People my age who are figuring out who they are, who change their entire personality based on whoever they're dating that month. It's exhausting. You know who you are. You're settled in yourself. That's not a deficit. It's what makes you interesting. This is a terrible idea, I said, even as part of me wanted desperately to believe him. Maybe, but I can't stop thinking about you, and I don't think you can stop thinking about me either. He was right. I couldn't. Even if there was something here, I said carefully, it would have to stay private, completely private. I can't have people knowing about this. The judgment alone. I understand. And it can't be serious. This can't become some kind of relationship. It's just whatever this is, for however long you're here. Okay. And the second it gets complicated or weird or someone gets hurt, it stops. Immediately. Agreed. I looked at him across my kitchen table, this young man with his earnest green eyes and his completely inappropriate feelings for me, and I made a decision that I knew I'd regret even as I was making it. Then, okay. His face transformed. Okay? Okay. But Jamie, I need you to promise me something. Anything. If you wake up tomorrow or next week or next month and realize this was a mistake, that you were just lonely in a new city or confused or whatever, you tell me immediately. No guilt, no drama, just honesty. I promise. Same goes for you. We sat there for a moment, both processing what we just agreed to. Then Jamie stood up, walked around the table, and kissed me. It wasn't tentative or uncertain. It was sure and warm and tasted like coffee and felt like stepping off a cliff into thin air. When he pulled back, he was smiling. I've wanted to do that for 2 weeks, he said. That's very inappropriate, I said. But I was smiling too. You have no idea. What followed was one of the strangest, most exhilarating periods of my life. During the day, we maintained our routine. Jamie went to work, I worked on my designs. We were careful, circumspect, nothing in our daytime interactions suggesting we were anything other than two people sharing a house out of convenience. But at night, everything changed. It started slowly. He'd join me on the couch while I watched television, sitting closer than necessary. I'd find excuses to touch him, brushing lint off his shoulder, fixing his collar, small contacts that felt charged with significance. Then one night, about a week after our conversation, he kissed me again. And then we were on my couch, 29 and 56, making out like teenagers. All of it feeling simultaneously ridiculous and inevitable and inevitable. We should go upstairs, I said eventually, breathless. Are you sure? I looked at him, this beautiful young man who somehow wanted me, and made another decision I'd probably regret. I'm sure. What happened in my bedroom that night was revelatory. I'd been with exactly 2 men in my entire life, a brief boyfriend in college and Thomas. My sexual experience was limited, my body marked by age and childbirth and the simple passage of time. I had stretch marks and loose skin and breasts that had nursed 2 babies and were no longer remotely perky. I was 56, and I looked 56, and I'd made my peace with that in most contexts. But being naked with a 29-year-old was a different matter entirely. "I need you to understand," I said, standing by the bed in my underwear, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm not 20 anymore. My body is perfect," he said firmly. He pulled off his own shirt, closed the distance between us. "Marion, you're gorgeous. Every part of you. And I need you to believe that, because I'm not lying or being charitable. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever been with." "You don't have to." He kissed me, effectively ending that sentence. "Stop arguing with me about your own body. I know what I want, and I want you." What followed was an education in desire I hadn't known I needed. Jamie was attentive and patient and genuinely interested in my pleasure in a way that felt almost foreign. Thomas had been an adequate lover, not bad, not particularly good, just adequate. Sex had become routine, mechanical, something we did because married people were supposed to. This was different. This was Jamie paying attention to every sound I made, every response, learning what I liked with the kind of focused attention he probably brought to his coding. This was me discovering that my body, my 56-year-old body that I'd mostly written off as past its prime, was capable of feeling things I'd never felt before. "You're amazing," he whispered afterward, both of us breathless and tangled in my sheets. "I'm old," I said, but I was smiling. "You're experienced. There's a difference." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking at me. "You know what you want. You're not afraid to ask for it. That's incredibly sexy. When did you get so good at this?" He laughed. "I've had practice. But Marion, this is different. This isn't just sex. This is... I don't even know how to describe it." "Then don't," I said, pulling him close again. "Just be here." We fell into a pattern, days of careful normalcy, nights of increasing intimacy. We cooked dinner together, watched movies curled up on the couch, talked about everything: his work frustrations, my design challenges, our families, our histories. He told me about his mother's string of failed relationships, about growing up feeling like he was always in the way. I told him about the slow death of my marriage to Thomas, about feeling like I'd disappeared into the role of wife and mother until I couldn't remember who I'd been before. "Do you miss being married?" he asked one night. "I miss the idea of it," I said honestly. "The partnership, the shared life. But I don't miss Thomas specifically. We'd become roommates who occasionally had sex. There was no passion, no real connection, just routine." "Is that what happened? You just drifted apart?" "More like I shrunk myself to fit his life, and eventually there wasn't enough of me left to sustain a real relationship." I turned to look at him. After the divorce, I had to figure out who I was without him. That's why the solitude was so important. I needed to fill my life with me again. And did you? Fill it with yourself? I was getting there. And then you showed up with your broken sink emergency and complicated everything. He smiled. "Sorry about that. I'm not," I admitted. And I wasn't. Despite the impossibility of it, despite knowing it couldn't last, I'd never felt more alive. But, of course, nothing that good can exist in a vacuum forever. The first complication came in the form of my daughter, Claire. She'd been texting occasionally, checking in, but had been too focused on her pregnancy to pay much attention to what was happening in my life. Then one day in early December, she called while I was making dinner. "Hey, Mom, quick question. Can I swing by tomorrow? I need to grab some of my old baby stuff from the basement, and James is working late." Tomorrow, when Jamie would definitely be home from work. Sure. What time?" "Around 6. I'll bring Thai food. We can have dinner." Actually, I should mention, I have a house guest, Thomas' son Jamie. He's been staying in your old room while he looks for an apartment. There was a pause. Dad's Jamie? I didn't even know he was in Boston. New job. Rental market's been difficult. That's nice of you, letting him stay. Another pause. Is it weird, having Dad's son there? It's fine. He's very quiet, very helpful. If she noticed the slight strain in my voice, she didn't comment. Okay, well, I'll bring extra Thai food then. See you tomorrow. I hung up and immediately felt panic rising. Claire was going to meet Jamie. Claire was going to see us together. And while we'd been so careful, so circumspect about not displaying any intimacy in public spaces, I had no idea if we could maintain that fiction under my daughter's observation. When Jamie got home that evening, I told him about Claire's visit. "No problem," he said easily. "I'll make myself scarce if you want. Or I can meet her, whatever makes you more comfortable. She already knows you're staying here. It would be weirder if you hid." I rubbed my face tiredly. We have to be really careful, Jamie. Claire can't know about us." "Of course not. Marion, I understand. We'll just be normal. Roommates. I'll be perfectly appropriate." But when Claire arrived the next evening, I saw immediately that our careful fiction was more transparent than I'd hoped. My daughter was 7.5 months pregnant, moving with the particular waddle of late pregnancy, and she looked exhausted. But her eyes were sharp as ever, and I watched her watch Jamie and me during dinner. Watched her notice how we moved around each other in the kitchen, how Jamie knew where I kept everything without asking, how we had an easy rhythm that spoke of more time together than 3 weeks would warrant. "So, Jamie," Claire said at one point, "how's the apartment search going?" "Honestly, not great. The market is brutal. I've looked at probably 20 places and haven't found anything remotely reasonable." "But you're not planning to stay here permanently?" There was something in her tone, not accusatory exactly, but pointed. "No, definitely not. I'm just grateful your mom's been so generous." He looked at me, and I saw him catch himself, adjust his expression to something more neutral. "She's been incredibly kind." After dinner, Claire asked me to help her carry boxes to her car. Once we were outside, alone, she turned to me. "Mom, what's going on?" "What do you mean?" "With Jamie. The way you two are around each other, it's not just roommates." "There's something else." My heart stopped. "Claire, I don't know what you think you're seeing. I'm seeing my mother look happier than I've seen her in years. I'm seeing you laugh and smile and actually seem alive again." She studied my face. "Is something happening between you two?" I could have lied, should have lied, but this was my daughter, and I'd raised her to value honesty even when it was uncomfortable. "It's complicated," I said carefully. "Oh my God, Mom, he's 29. "I know." "His dad's son." "I know that too." "Mom," she looked genuinely distressed. I don't even know what this is. How long has this been going on?" "Not long, a few weeks. And Claire, it's not serious. It's just something that's happening that will stop happening when he moves out." "Does Dad know?" "God, no. And he can't know. No one can know." She was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, "Are you happy?" The question surprised me. "What? Are you happy? With whatever this is?" I thought about it honestly. Yes, surprisingly, terrifyingly, inappropriately happy. "Then I'm not going to judge you." She put her hand on my arm. "Mom, you've spent so many years taking care of other people, taking care of me and David, managing Dad's moods, making yourself smaller so everyone else could be comfortable. If this thing with Jamie, whatever it is, if it makes you happy, even temporarily, then I'm glad. Just please be careful. Please don't get hurt." I felt tears prick my eyes. When did you get so wise? I've been watching you my whole life, learning how to be strong and independent and kind, even when it costs you. She hugged me awkwardly around her pregnant belly. "You deserve to be happy, Mom, even if it's with an inappropriately young man who's technically my stepbrother. I laugh despite myself. He's not technically anything. Your father and I are divorced, and Nicole and your father were barely married 4 years. Semantics. But Mom, seriously, be careful with your heart, with the situation. This can't end well. You know that, right? I know. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are very different things. After Claire left, I found Jamie cleaning up the kitchen. She knows, I said. He turned, concerned. What did she say? That she's not going to judge me, that she wants me to be happy, that this probably can't end well. All accurate assessments. I leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. Jamie, maybe we should stop this before it gets more complicated. He put down the dish he'd been washing and came over to me. Is that what you want? I don't know what I want. This whole thing is insane. That's not an answer. The answer is that I should want to stop. That would be the smart, rational, self-protective thing. I looked up at him. But I don't want to stop. And that terrifies me. He cupped my face in his hands, gentle and certain. Marion, I'm not going to push you into anything. If you want this to end, we end it. But if you're stopping because you think you should, because you're afraid of what other people will think, or because you're convinced you don't deserve to be happy, then I'm going to argue with you about it. You don't understand. I understand that you're amazing. I understand that being with you is the best thing that's happened to me in years. And I understand that you've spent so long believing you're not worth wanting that you can't accept when someone genuinely wants you. I'm 56, I said, returning to that familiar refrain. In 13 years, I'll be 70. You'll still be in your 40s. This has an expiration date, Jamie. It has to. So, he kissed my forehead, my cheeks, the corner of my mouth. So, we have an expiration date. So what? That doesn't make this less real right now. Marion, I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm not asking for forever. I'm just asking for now. For whatever time we have. Can't that be enough? I wanted to say no. I was wanted to be sensible and self-protective and all the things 56-year-old women are supposed to be. Instead, I kissed him. Okay, I whispered against his mouth. Now, for as long as it lasts. That's all I'm asking. That night, in my bed, he made love to me with a tenderness that felt almost painful in its honesty. And afterward, holding each other in the darkness, I felt something crack open in my chest. I was falling in love with him. Not the wild, desperate love of youth, but something quieter, more profound. The love that comes from being truly seen, truly known, truly wanted, exactly as you are. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that this was going to break my heart. But in that moment, with Jamie's arms around me and his breath soft against my neck, I decided it was worth it. Some heartbreaks are worth having. December passed in a strange, suspended reality. Jamie continued his apartment search with decreasing urgency. I continued my design work, met deadlines, maintained my professional life, while my personal life spiraled into territory I'd never imagined. We were careful, so careful. No displays of affection anywhere someone might see. No intimate touches in public. When we went out together, which was rarely, we maintained the careful distance of housemates, nothing more. But in private, we built a world that existed just for us. Jamie cooked elaborate dinners while I worked on designs, music playing from my laptop, both of us moving through my kitchen with practiced ease. We watched movies on my couch, his arm around me, my head on his shoulder. We made love in my bedroom with a passion that surprised us both. Not the frantic urgency of new lovers, but something deeper, more connected. And we talked. God, we talked about everything. He told me about his dreams for his career, about the startup he wanted to launch someday, about his complicated feelings toward his parents, loving them but also resenting the chaos of their relationships. I told him about my 20s, about the woman I'd been before marriage and children, ambitious, reckless, creative, about the slow process of losing that woman, of filing her down to fit the shape of wife and mother, about the years after my divorce spent trying to excavate her from the rubble. "She's still there," Jamie said one night. "That woman. I can see her. She comes out when you're working on a design you're excited about, when you get passionate about something, when you forget to be self-conscious." "You make her come out," I admitted. "You make me feel like that woman again." "Good. She's my favorite version of you." "What about the 56-year-old version with stretch marks and gray hair?" "That is the version I'm talking about," he said seriously. "Marion, you keep separating yourself into parts. The young woman you were, the older woman you are now. But you're all of it at once. All those versions exist in you simultaneously. That's what makes you so fascinating." I wanted to believe him. Some nights, I almost did. We spent Christmas separately. Jamie flew to Chicago to see his mother. I had dinner with David and Claire's husband, James. My children were careful not to mention Jamie, but I felt their awareness of the situation like a weight. "You seem good, Mom," David said at one point. "Different. Happier." "I am happy," I said, and it was true. When Jamie returned the day after Christmas, he came straight to my house from the airport. I opened the door to find him standing there with snow in his hair and a smile on his face. "I missed you," he said. "It was 3 days. Still missed you." He kissed me there in my doorway, where any neighbor could have seen, and I didn't care. We spent New Year's Eve together, just the two of us. Made dinner, drank champagne, counted down to midnight while watching the ball drop on television like a couple decades older than we were. At midnight, he kissed me and said, "This year with you has been the best year of my life." We've only known each other 2 months. Best 2 months of my life, then. I laughed, but something in his expression made my breath catch. He was serious, completely serious. "Jamie, I love you," he said quietly. "I know I shouldn't. I know all the reasons this is complicated and impossible and probably temporary. But Marion, I love you, and I needed you to know that." I felt tears start to fall, couldn't stop them. "This can't last. You know that, right? Eventually, you're going to want someone your own age, someone you can build a real life with." "I want you. For now. But Jamie, I can't give you children or decades of youth, or—" "I don't want children. I don't want decades of youth. I want you, exactly as you are, for however long you'll have me." He wiped my tears with his thumbs. "I know you're terrified. I know you think this has to end. But can we just see? Can we stop deciding the ending before we're even halfway through the story?" I looked at this beautiful, impossible young man who somehow loved me, and I made yet another decision I'd probably regret. "Okay," I whispered. "We'll see." He kissed me at 1 minute past midnight, and it felt like a promise neither of us knew how to keep. January brought a reckoning I should have anticipated. Thomas called one afternoon while I was working. I almost didn't answer. We spoke perhaps once every few months, usually about logistics involving our children, but something made me pick up. "Marion," he said, his voice tight, "I need to talk to you about Jamie." My heart stopped. What about him? "He's still staying with you. It's been almost 3 months. The rental market has been difficult." "Marion, cut the bullshit. Claire told me something's going on between you two." I felt my world tilt. "She what?" "She didn't give me details, said it wasn't her place, but she's worried about you, and frankly, so am I." "He's 29 years old. I'm aware of his age, Thomas. Then you should also be aware of how this looks, how inappropriate this is. He's my son. He's your adult son who you barely saw growing up," I shot back. anger rising. Don't suddenly play the concerned father now that it's convenient. That's not fair. None of this is fair. But Jamie and I are both adults, and what happens between us is none of your business. There was a long silence. Then, are you sleeping with him? That's definitely none of your business. Jesus Christ, Marion, what are you thinking? He's a kid. He's not a kid. He's a 29-year-old man with a career and a life and agency. Stop infantilizing him to make yourself feel better about whatever moral judgment you're making. I'm judging you for taking advantage of someone young enough to be your son who was vulnerable and needed a place to stay. I didn't take advantage of anyone, I said, my voice shaking with fury. Jamie pursued me, if you must know, and I resisted precisely because of all the reasons you're listing. But ultimately, we're both adults who made a choice, and it's not your place, not as my ex-husband or his father, to have an opinion about it. People are going to talk, Marion. This is going to look bad for both of you. Then let them talk. I've spent my entire life worrying about what people think, making myself smaller and quieter and more acceptable. I'm done with that, Thomas. I'm done caring about other people's opinions of my choices. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking. I felt sick and furious and strangely liberated all at once. When Jamie came home that evening, I told him about the conversation. He was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, I should call him. Try to explain. Explain what? That you're in love with your father's ex-wife who's nearly 30 years older than you? I'm sure that conversation will go great. Marion, he's right, you know, about how this looks, about how inappropriate this is. I paced my living room, feeling caged. Maybe we should stop. Maybe this has gone too far. Jamie caught my hand, stopping my pacing. Do you want to stop? I want to stop feeling like I'm doing something wrong. I want to stop worrying about my children judging me and your father being disgusted and everyone thinking I'm some kind of predator. Are you a predator? No. Did you manipulate me or take advantage of me? Of course not. Then stop letting other people's opinions control your life. He pulled me close. Marion, I don't care what my father thinks. I barely have a relationship with him anyway. And if people want to judge us, let them. But don't give up something that makes you happy just because other people don't understand it. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. We care about each other. We make each other happy. Everything else is just noise. I wanted to believe him. But that night, lying awake after Jamie had fallen asleep, I felt the weight of the impossibility settling over me. This couldn't last. Eventually, Jamie would realize he'd wasted his youth on someone too old for him. Eventually, the reality of our age difference would become undeniable. Eventually, one of us would get hurt. Probably me. Almost certainly me. But for now, for this moment, I had him. And maybe, just maybe, that had to be enough. The end, when it came, was both inevitable and surprising. In mid-February, Jamie came home from work looking conflicted. I need to tell you something, he said. My heart sank. This was it. The moment when he'd come to his senses, realized this was a mistake, wanted to end things with as little damage as possible. Okay, I said, bracing myself. I found an apartment. What? An apartment. A good one, actually. In Brookline, near here. My roommate situation fell through at work. One of my coworkers was looking for someone to take over his lease early. It's perfect, Marion. Exactly what I've been looking for. That's great, I said, my voice coming out hollow. But here's the thing. He sat down across from me, taking my hands. I don't want to take it. What? Why not? Because I don't want to leave. I know we said this was just until I found a place. I know the whole arrangement was supposed to be temporary. But, Marion, I want to stay. Here, with you. I pulled my hands away, standing up, needing distance. Jamie, we can't. Why not? Because this was always temporary. Because you were supposed to find an apartment and move out, and we were both supposed to move on with our lives. That was the agreement. Fuck the agreement, he said, standing too. I love you. You love me. Why are we pretending this has to end? Because it does have to end. Because eventually you're going to wake up and realize you've wasted years of your life on a woman who's going to be 60 while you're still in your 30s. I'm not going to wake up and realize that. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He crossed the room, taking my face in his hands. Marion, listen to me. I know what I want. I've known for months. I want you. Not despite your age, not in spite of the complications. I want you, exactly as you are, for as long as you'll have me. Jamie, be realistic. What kind of future could we possibly have? You can't introduce me to your friends as your 56-year-old girlfriend without them thinking something's wrong with you. You can't bring me to work events without questions. We can't have children together, can't grow old together in any normal way. Who says I want normal? He looked at me intently. Marion, I've spent my whole life watching people pursue normal relationships that make them miserable. My parents, both sets, your marriage to my dad. Normal doesn't mean happy. And I'd rather have strange and happy than normal and miserable. This is insane. Maybe. But I've never been happier than I've been these last few months with you. And I don't think you have either. He was right. Damn him. He was right. What are you proposing? I asked quietly. That we just continue this? Indefinitely? I'm proposing that I don't take the apartment. That I keep living here with you. That we stop treating this like it has an expiration date and just see where it goes. Jamie, I know all the arguments. I know all the reasons this shouldn't work. But Marion, it does work. We work. And I love you too much to walk away from that just because it doesn't fit some conventional idea of what a relationship should look like. I looked at him, this impossible, wonderful young man who somehow wanted to build a life with me, and felt the last of my resistance crumble. Okay, I whispered. Okay? Okay. Stay. Let's see where this goes. Let's be insane together. He kissed me, and it felt like jumping off a cliff and learning to fly at the same time. I love you, he said against my mouth. I love you too, even though this is probably a terrible idea. The best terrible idea we've ever had. That night, we celebrated by doing something I'd been terrified to do. We went out to dinner, in public, as a couple. Not somewhere in our neighborhood where someone might recognize us, but a restaurant in downtown Boston where we could be anonymous, where we could hold hands across the table and share food and kiss without worrying about judgment. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. You're beautiful, Jamie said at one point, looking at me in the candlelight. You're biased. I'm observant. There's a difference. An older couple at the next table kept glancing at us. I saw the woman lean over and whisper something to her husband, saw their eyes assess Jamie and me, and the obvious age difference between us. I waited for the shame to hit, for the urge to make myself smaller, to apologize for taking up space, to explain away what we were. But it didn't come. Instead, I reached across the table, took Jamie's hand, and said loud enough for the neighboring table to hear, "Am really glad you're staying." His smile could have lit the entire restaurant. Me too. We walked home through the cold February night, arms around each other, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not certainty. I wasn't sure I'd ever have certainty about this relationship, but acceptance. This was my life, strange and unconventional and probably doomed to raised eyebrows and uncomfortable questions. But it was mine, and I was choosing it. When we got home, Jamie said, I should probably move my stuff from the guest room to your room, if I'm staying. Are you asking to move into my bedroom? I'm asking to move into your life. The bedroom just seems like a logical next step. We moved his things that night, not many, had been living light, planning to leave. But seeing his clothes in my closet, his toiletries in my bathroom, his books on my nightstand felt significant. Like he was claiming space in my life instead of just borrowing it temporarily. This is real now, I said, looking at his jacket hanging next to mine in the closet. It's been real, he corrected. Now it's just official. We made love that night with a new kind of freedom. No more pretending this was temporary. No more holding back pieces of ourselves because we knew it would end. Just two people choosing each other, completely and without reservation. Afterward, Jamie said something that made my throat tight. Thank you. For what? For giving us a chance. For not letting your fear win. For being brave enough to want me, even though it's complicated. You make it sound noble. Really, I'm just selfish. I didn't want to give you up. That's not selfish. That's honest. He kissed my shoulder, and I love your honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. I turned to face him in the darkness. Jamie, I need you to promise me something. Anything.
If this stops working, if you meet someone your own age or realize this isn't what you want, or just wake up one day and think, what am I doing with my life? Promise you'll tell me. Promise you won't stay out of obligation or guilt or because you think you'll hurt me. I promise. But Marion, that's not going to happen. You can't know that. Yes, I can, because I've been looking for you my whole life. I just didn't know it until I found you. I wanted to tell him he was young and naive and had no idea what he was saying. Instead, I chose to believe him. Spring came slowly that year. Winter releasing its grip one grudging degree at a time, but when it finally arrived, it felt like vindication. Jamie and I settled into our life together with surprising ease. He worked, I worked. We cooked dinner most nights, went for walks on weekends, maintained the rhythms of any normal couple with one glaring exception, the nearly 3-decade age gap that no one could ignore. My children came to terms with it mostly. David remained politely neutral, treating Jamie like any of my other boyfriends, which is to say, with mild disinterest, and the occasional check-in to make sure I was happy. Claire was more complicated. She clearly loved seeing me happy, but struggled with the optics of the situation. I just worry about what people will say, she admitted over coffee one afternoon. Not for me, I don't care, but for you, Mom, people can be cruel. People have always been cruel to women who don't follow the rules, I said. I'm 56. I'm allowed to break some rules. Is this serious? Like long-term? I don't know. We're figuring it out as we go. And you're happy? Completely. She smiled, even though I could see her reservations. Then I'm happy for you. Thomas was less gracious. He sent several angry emails and left one voicemail that was mostly incoherent ranting about appropriateness and judgment. I didn't respond to any of them. Eventually, he stopped trying. Jamie's mother was a different story. She called one day in April, and Jamie answered with visible trepidation. I heard only his side of the conversation, but it was enough. No, Mom, I'm not living with Dad. I'm living with someone. Yes, someone serious. Actually, she's closer to your age than mine. No, I'm not having a midlife crisis. I'm 29. Because I love her, that's why. When he hung up, he looked exhausted. Well, I asked. She thinks you're a predator. I'm having psychological issues stemming from childhood trauma, and this relationship is proof that both her and Dad failed as parents. So it went well? He laughed despite himself. She'll come around, or she won't. Either way, it doesn't change how I feel about you.